So my name is Omar Rapasad. It is 3:53 p.m., October 17, 2019. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about being a target. So I tweeted a bunch of tweets today on RSHI and I-911. Those were mine. They talk about the differences between targets and regular people. So considering that there are millions of people on watch lists all over the world, there's a lot of targets. So targets are treated differently. Once your name is on a list, and you could be flagged by anybody, just about anyone. Once your name is on a list, you are turned out. So, which means that everybody or anybody can do anything to you, and it's all covered, it's all fixed. The cops will not take your side on anything. Absolutely nothing. Nothing you report is going to be taken seriously, or notes are not going to be taken. Anything that you call about, you report, go to the station, you're going to be told that you're mentally ill. So your credibility is going to be compromised instead of your statements being believed. So there is an ongoing targeting in this building, and somebody in this building actually flagged me. I think I was a target of traffickers before I came to live in this building. Or maybe it's possible that my brother was flagged, and because he was flagged, the entire family was on a list. But certain people in the family were targeted more or less than others. So every target receives a different a different treatment. They're put on different lines of targeting, different modes of targeting. So I'm going to start a series of talks in which I'm going to describe one by one, without providing names of the companies that I work for, how this affected me in the workplace. As I said before, the flagging, the official flagging, um, was done publicly from this building. I am not sure who did it in the building. It was never disclosed. So when it started in this building, there were certain behavior patterns that I have started observing around me by the people in the building, and then by people outside of the building. This is when the targeting became public, and it became um, um, overt rather than covert. Like I said, I'm suspecting it was covert before that. So in this building, I was tracked, I was stalked, I was reported about. There were meetings about me. There was a manager who knew everything about me, which meant that I was being surveilled inside of my home and accessed inside of my home. Directed energy weapons started being used very openly on me. I started getting marks on my skin. I started feeling dizzy. The temperature in my body started fluctuating. Um, and all the other symptoms that I documented. I'm not going to go into the whole list. So this was done in this building. It started in this building. This public, very overt targeting started in this building. And right after that, I started noticing that the exact pattern of targeting that was taking place in this building was also in the workplace, which means that the person who had the receipt from the police after targeting me based on lies and frames and setups, um, they had infiltrated my workplace and was collecting data on me to run experiments, to traffic, to customize to the clients that they were trafficking to remotely. And then the idea was when I was passed around enough times to several people, who knows how many, eventually the customization and the training that went into the customization, that's remote customization now, it's going to turn physical. So a lot of these training um, techniques are being used as the person sleeps, as I sleep. And I demonstrated this in some of my videos. I'm going to get a little bit more organized with my videos. I'm going to put them in lists, playlists on the YouTube, so it can be clearly seen, the progression that can be clearly seen in those playlists. So when I started this, I'm sure you can appreciate that when the power is turned up, I'm in pain. So when you're in pain, it sometimes you're not operating at 150% or 110% like I normally operate mentally. Your mental alertness drops, and if it's extremely excruciatingly painful, then you're just disabled for that period of time. I mean, you're on painkillers, so you really can't you can't operate on the same level as if when you're not being heavily targeted. So so as I was saying, I'm going to start a series where in which I'm going to describe company by company what I experienced. I have described in a lot of detail what I experienced in this building in my tweets and my YouTube videos, showing the signals and temperature changes, blood pressure changes, heart rate changes. So there's a lot of detail that's associated with the targeting from this building. Um, I'm going to talk about each company in detail, company by company, without calling names. I'm going to talk in detail about how I was targeted in those companies and how I was passed around in these companies and set up and framed. So, very briefly, let me start with company number one. Um, I was trying to sell my place, this unit that I'm in right now, because of all the harassment that I didn't know. I didn't know anything about the flagging. I didn't know anything about the infiltration in my workplace. I just knew that I was harassed in every workplace that I've been in the longest time, for years, 20 plus years. But I did not connect the dots. I did not know it was all connected. Really, it was about the person who had the receipt for me infiltrating my workplace and driving me out of the workplace. Because once you're on a list, a target is seen as an enemy of the state. A target is seen as someone that's suspected of doing, whatever your report, um, whatever the perpetrators are reporting about you. So you're seen with, perceived as a criminal. You're perceived as someone to be suspected of. You're not to be trusted. You should not be in the community. You should not hold a job. You're mentally retarded, and whatever else that the perpetrators are reporting about you, which is registered back about you to the cops through the municipality. At least this is what I understand. I'm registered with the municipality. So um, what I'm posting on this YouTube videos channel, and um, the videos on the channel is countering the setups and the frames and the lies. It's the truth, basically, is what it is. So the constant push to get me pulled out of my home, which happened once before, get me falsely charged, which happened once before, is the ongoing targeting until disposal takes place. A target has to be disposed of, imprisoned, mentally committed, charged, until you get imprisoned permanently, committed permanently, or suicided, meaning that rumors are spread, um, claiming that you're suicidal when really you're not. And remote technologies are used to induce depression, and make you look like you're depressed, like you're suicidal. You're locking yourself away from people. You don't have any social interactions, when really this is caused by external forces. It's made to happen. The remote technologies causes depression. The stalking and the harassment every time you walk out of your unit makes you it discourages you. It discourages you from going out, because every time you go out, you're red alerted, which means that every time you go out, your body's pulsed and the powers stand up with signals that I demonstrated in previous videos. And I'll give you a brief example of today's targeting. Because right now my arm is being targeted right here, and the left eye is being pulsed. So you could see a slight difference between the two eyes here. Um, and if I took my temperature, you would actually see the temperature differences between one side and the other, which is a clear indication of being pulsed with these signals, because the spots on the body changes. So the temperature changes from side to side. Um, so at company number one, let's go back to the start of this public targeting in the workplace. Um, I was stopped inside the company, within the company itself, and in the building that the company was located in, and outside as well. There was one specific person who was a steward that he knew everything. He was supposed to know everything about me. And I suspect that he became a steward after somebody else in the company signed for me and passed me around, meaning that people were logging into me inside of the company, and they were looking at me naked, basically. So, and they were also accessing me inside of my home. So they knew everything about me in the company, and there were meetings held, and they decided what to do about what was reported about me, because they were getting reports about me from the people who were stalking me on their behalf. Then, when that process was finished and I was signed back in with the police, a Muslim man who was working for in the same company, because I was still there, because I didn't have a clue what was going on, he became a steward. This is what I heard outside the window in this building. It's all connected. This was never disclosed to me. So then he became a steward and held the contract, and the contract kept on extending because I was being flagged with new suspicions, with new whatever it is that was being reported about me. So I was being followed around like the Chinese perpetrators do in this building, and enlist other people to do it as well. Other races, other ethnic backgrounds do it as well. They subcontract from the Chinese traffickers. So in this building, it's the same idea. People subcontract from the person who has the receipt. So the idea is the person who signs me out it has control over my life, basically. They could say, and he knows it. He knew it at the time, I should say. He could say and do anything and get away with it because it was all covered, and he knew I was a target, And he got that information from the flag and from the people who flagged me in this building, which were the Chinese traffickers. The common denominator is the Chinese traffickers. And I suspect that before it went into the workplace publicly, I was being passed around to rich Chinese people in Scarborough for years before that for voyeurism and masturbation rings. Of course, with the police's knowledge and participation, because they were the ones who were flagging me. So the policemen who are involved in this are taking part in trafficking. These are dirty cops who are taking part in the trafficking, which is why they are insisting that I am mentally ill when I'm not. So, anyways, to go back to this company, this there is a connection between this company and my now deceased brother. So, from the harassing comments I get outside the window, I heard that my brother had a trial and he found me guilty, and this Muslim man at work subcontracted from my brother. I'm not sure if that arrangement is correct, but this is what the Chinese traffickers who initiated this whole thing talk about outside the window. So I was harassed in that company, company number one, by the coworkers, by the person who had the receipt. I was passed around, and there was a human rights hearing from that company. So, um, and there's documentation in that case that in hindsight now is directly related to this whole trafficking ring, this whole trafficking um, criminal activity that's taken place under the flag, because it is criminal activity. I mean, it was presented to the public and passed out to the public. The information was passed out to the public as a game. It was presented to the public like a game. You know, we are going to sign her in as this, and next week we are going to reverse it. So there was a weekly lease from the city. And this man would sign me out every Tuesday or Wednesday, went to the city hall and signed me out every Wednesday and on a weekly basis, and what never disclosed this to me. Never disclosed this to me. There was all kinds of whisperings and there's all kinds of gossiping, and there was talk about my being his wife in the company and so on. And now this is all making sense in the grand scheme of things. So that was company number one, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of what happened in that company. As I said, there was a human rights hearing that happened um, um, based on what went on in that company. And I was only there for 6 months. So that's company number one. And there is a lot of targeting that came from my family based on this file that was accumulated about me from this building, 25 Bamberg Circle. Someone at 25 Bamberg Circle, Toronto, flagged me with the cops under the Mental Health Act, and somebody swore that he suspected that I was a prostitute, and it was piggybacked on. So at this point, after years and years of doing this with all kinds of different people involved, I heard it's absoluted that I'm mentally ill and I was a prostitute or am a prostitute, which of course is not true. I am not mentally ill. There is a lot of stress, symptoms of stress. There is no mental illness. There's no mental insanity, and there is no mental retardation, as is being reported about me. This is all part of targeting and degradation. They're supposed to report degrading things. The perpetrators are supposed to report degrading reports, degrading comments, and degrading observations about me. This is part of the agenda, the targeting agenda. This is why my name is on the list. Talk to you another time.